I'm Rachel Bennett, 31 years old, and the echo of my footsteps through the Multnomah County Courthouse will haunt me forever. The rhythmic tap of my cane against marble floors announced my arrival, each step deliberate, each breath measured. Pain still radiated through my body, a constant reminder of what they'd done to me. My hands trembled as I pushed open the heavy courtroom doors, but not from weakness. This was rage, pure and crystalline, sharpened by months of lies and abandonment. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Whitman family sat in the gallery like royalty surveying their kingdom. George Whitman, my father-in-law, sat with his arms crossed, that familiar expression of disdain carved into his weathered face. Beside him, Patricia adjusted her pearl necklace, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times whenever she felt superior to someone. Victoria, my sister-in-law, scrolled through her phone with studied indifference, as if this were merely an inconvenient interruption to her day. And Derek, my husband, the man who'd promised to love me in sickness and in health, couldn't even meet my eyes. They all wore variations of the same smug expression, secure in their belief that they'd orchestrated the perfect crime. They thought I was finished, that the woman who'd built Bennett Moments Photography from nothing would simply disappear, another footnote in their family's legacy of getting exactly what they wanted. They'd calculated every angle, manipulated every detail, and convinced themselves that I'd never stand in front of them again. But I wasn't alone. The woman beside me, dressed in an elegant navy suit, caused George to leap from his seat so fast his briefcase clattered to the floor, his face drained of all color as recognition struck him like lightning. Patricia's hand flew to her mouth, her perfectly applied lipstick suddenly garish against her pale skin. Victoria's phone slipped from her fingers. Derek simply stared, his mouth opening and closing soundlessly like a fish drowning in air. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. The woman beside me stood calmly, her presence more damning than any evidence folder or witness testimony. She represented everything they'd tried to hide, every lie they'd built their scheme upon. In that frozen moment, I watched their confidence shatter like glass. They believed they'd buried my future in that hospital bed at Providence Medical Center, where I lay alone and abandoned in a medically induced coma. They thought they could steal everything I'd sacrificed for, the $750,000 contract with the Cascade Luxury Hotel Group, my photography studio in Portland's Pearl District, my reputation that I'd built one wedding at a time over 8 years. They assumed I was too broken, too trusting, too naive to fight back. They were catastrophically wrong. If it were you, would you make them pay for their betrayal, or would you give them a chance to make things right? Think about it. Comment below and let's debate what justice really means when the people who should protect you become the architects of your destruction. It all started 9 months before that courtroom confrontation, on what should have been one of the proudest days of my professional life. I remember walking out of the Cascade Luxury Hotel Group headquarters in downtown Portland, the contract clutched in my hands like a sacred text. The rain had stopped for once, and weak autumn sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the city in gold. $750,000. 3 years of exclusive photography services for their Pacific Northwest properties. Every wedding, every corporate event, every promotional shoot would bear my signature style. I'd spent the last 8 years building Bennett Moments Photography from the ground up. Fresh out of college with a degree in visual arts, and nothing but a used camera and unwavering determination, I'd photographed everything from birthday parties to bar mitzvahs, slowly building my reputation one satisfied client at a time. I developed a distinctive style, capturing not just images but emotions, freezing moments of pure joy that couples would treasure for lifetimes. My Instagram following had grown to over 200,000. Magazine features followed. Then came the smaller hotel contracts, proving I could deliver consistent quality under pressure. the Cascade deal was my breakthrough, the kind of contract that would cement my place among Portland's elite photographers. It meant financial security, professional validation, and the freedom to expand my business exactly how I'd envisioned. I'd negotiated every term myself, presented my portfolio to their executive board, and won them over with passion and professionalism. This wasn't luck or connections. This was earned. I drove to the West Hills, to the Whitman family home where Derek and I had been living for the past 3 years. The house was a monument to old Portland money, a sprawling craftsman-style estate with manicured gardens and a view of Mount Hood on clear days. We'd moved in temporarily after our wedding, a temporary arrangement that had somehow become permanent. George had insisted, claiming it made financial sense while we saved for our own place. I should have recognized it for what it was, another way to maintain control, to keep me under their watchful, disapproving eyes. The moment I walked through the front door, I knew something was off. The air felt charged, heavy with unspoken tension. Victoria sat at the dining room table, her laptop open, but her eyes locked on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. She was 34, 3 years older than me, and had spent her entire life as the golden child. Her marketing consulting business was successful enough, handling accounts for local tech startups and restaurants, but she'd always operated in her father's shadow, seeking his approval like a plant stretching towards sunlight. I held up the contract, unable to contain my smile. The words burst out of me in a rush of excitement and relief. I did it. The Cascade Group signed. $750,000 for 3 years exclusive. This changes everything for the studio. Victoria's laptop screen reflected in her eyes, cold and calculating. She stood slowly, her chair scraping against hardwood floors with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. Her voice, when she spoke, was ice wrapped in silk. Your studio. Interesting choice of words. I was under the impression that Derek's initial investment made him a partner in Bennett Moments. Doesn't that make it our family's business? The joy drained from my body like water through a sieve. Derek had loaned me $15,000 during the studio's first year, money I'd paid back in full within 18 months. We'd signed paperwork, documented everything properly. It was a loan, not an investment. There was no partnership. No shared ownership. Bennett Moments was mine, built on my vision, my talent, my endless hours of work. I tried to explain this calmly, rationally, but Victoria wasn't listening. She never listened, not really. She moved closer, invading my space in that way she'd perfected, using her height advantage to intimidate. You really think you earned this on your... You with your little camera and your Instagram likes. We gave you credibility. The Whitman name opened doors for you. Without us, you'd still be shooting engagement.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Photos at Waterfront Park for $200. Her words were designed to wound, to diminish everything I'd accomplished. This was a pattern I'd endured for 3 years. The constant reminders that I wasn't quite good enough, didn't come from the right family, hadn't attended the right schools. George made comments about my state school education compared to his Ivy League pedigree. Patricia asked pointed questions about my parents' modest home in Beaverton, comparing it unfavorably to their generational wealth. They treated my success as borrowed glory, reflecting their superiority rather than my hard work. But this was different. This wasn't just petty sniping or social one-upmanship. Victoria's eyes held something darker, a hunger that made my stomach clench. She wanted what I'd built. She wanted my contract, my clients, my reputation. In her mind, she deserved it more, and my existence as the person who'd actually earned it was an insult to the natural order of things. I should have walked away. I should have left that house immediately, found Derek at his investment firm downtown, and insisted we finally get our own place. But I was angry too, tired of being made to feel small in my own marriage, exhausted from years of subtle put-downs and backhanded compliments. So I stood my ground. I told Victoria that the contract had my name on it, that the Cascade Group had hired me for my artistic vision and proven track record, and that her jealousy didn't change facts. Her face transformed, beautiful features twisting into something ugly and unfamiliar. The mask of sophisticated superiority cracked, revealing raw rage underneath. She stepped even closer, her breath hot on my face. "You ungrateful little opportunist. We welcomed you into this family. We gave you everything. And this is how you repay us, by flaunting your mediocre achievements like they matter." Patricia appeared in the doorway, drawn by raised voices. Instead of diffusing the situation, she surveyed the scene with cold assessment and sided immediately with her daughter. "Really, Rachel, there's no need to be dramatic about a simple business contract. Victoria has been consulting with hotel groups for years. Perhaps she could help ensure you don't embarrass yourself or damage the Whitman reputation with amateur mistakes." The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. Even my victories were reframed as potential embarrassments they needed to manage. George materialized behind his wife, his presence filling the hallway like gathering storm clouds. His voice carried the weight of boardroom authority and inherited privilege. "Let's all calm down and discuss this reasonably. Rachel, you need to understand that family comes first. What benefits one of us benefits all of us. Surely you can see how Victoria's expertise would strengthen your little photography venture." My little photography venture. The dismissive phrase encapsulated everything they thought about me and my work. Derek finally came home an hour later, loosening his tie as he walked through the door. I tried to explain what had happened, how his family was already attempting to claim credit and control over my contract. He listened with that distracted expression I'd grown to hate, the one that said he was mentally still at the office, calculating returns on investment rather than engaging with his wife's concerns. He suggested I was overreacting, reading too much into Victoria's natural interest in my success. He reminded me that his family had been nothing but generous, letting us live rent-free in their home, including me in their social circle despite my different background. The implication was clear. I should be grateful, compliant, willing to share my achievements with people who'd never supported my dreams. That night at dinner, the tension crystallized into something dangerous. Patricia had prepared one of her elaborate meals, the kind designed to showcase her domestic superiority, 7 courses, each presented with detailed explanations of ingredients sourced from specific local farms and markets. The dining room gleamed with crystal and silver, everything positioned precisely according to some invisible standard of elegance. I should have paid more attention to my plate. I should have questioned why Patricia personally served me when she usually had staff handle such tasks. But I was distracted, still processing the afternoon's confrontation, trying to find words that would make Derek understand the seriousness of what his family was doing. The first bite of the main course, a delicate seafood risotto, tasted slightly off, nothing alarming, just a subtle bitterness beneath the saffron and white wine. I took another bite, not wanting to offend Patricia, who watched me with peculiar intensity. Within minutes my throat began to tighten. My skin flushed hot, then cold, the room tilted sideways as my airways constricted. I'm severely allergic to shellfish, a fact documented in my medical records since childhood. Everyone in the Whitman family knew this. We'd navigated countless restaurant meals around my allergy. Patricia had cooked shellfish-free versions of dishes for 3 years to accommodate me, but that night, my plate contained something the others didn't. Later I would learn it was concentrated shrimp paste, carefully incorporated into just my serving, enough to trigger a catastrophic reaction but subtle enough to seem like a tragic accident. The last thing I remember clearly was Victoria's face across the table, not shocked or concerned, but satisfied. Derek was calling 911, his voice tight with panic that sounded almost theatrical. George demanded to know what I'd eaten, as if I'd foolishly poisoned myself. Patricia stood frozen, her hand over her heart, but her eyes were calculating, measuring, assessing outcomes. Then there was only darkness, my body shutting down as anaphylactic shock overwhelmed my system. The ambulance ride existed in fragments, sirens wailing, paramedics shouting medical terminology, the sharp sting of epinephrine that came too late to prevent catastrophic swelling. Providence Medical Center's emergency room became a blur of bright lights and desperate voices trying to keep me alive. My brain swelled. Oxygen deprivation caused damage the doctors wouldn't fully understand for weeks. They induced a coma to give my body time to heal, to reduce the inflammation threatening permanent neurological damage. I was 31 years old, at the peak of my career and my life, and I was dying because someone had deliberately put shellfish in my food. When I finally surfaced from the darkness 2.5 weeks later, I was alone. The hospital room was sterile and quiet, except for the mechanical beeping of monitors tracking my vitals. Weak afternoon light filtered through blinds, casting shadows across white walls. My head felt stuffed with cotton, my thoughts moving slowly through thick fog. Every part of my body ached with a deep, exhausted pain that spoke of serious trauma. A nurse entered, a kind-faced woman in her 50s who introduced herself as Jennifer. Her eyes widened when she saw me conscious, and relief flooded her features. "Oh, thank God. You're awake. Let me get your doctor. We weren't sure when or if you'd come back to us." The words took time to penetrate my sluggish mind. When or if? How long had I been under? Jennifer explained that I'd been in a medically induced coma for 18 days. 18 days of my life simply gone, erased while my brain healed from the trauma of oxygen deprivation and severe allergic reaction. 18 days during which anything could have happened. My voice came out as a hoarse whisper when I asked about Derek, about his family. Jennifer's expression shifted, becoming carefully neutral in the way medical professionals adopt when delivering difficult news. She told me that Derek had visited twice in the first 3 days, then stopped coming. George and Patricia had called the hospital multiple times initially, asking about my prognosis, but hadn't visited at all. Victoria had never made contact. The abandonment hit harder than any physical pain. My husband, the man who'd vowed to stand by me in sickness and in health, had visited twice and then disappeared. His parents, who'd insisted I was family, couldn't be bothered to sit beside my hospital bed while I fought for my life. And Victoria, whose jealousy had sparked the confrontation that led to this nightmare, had simply vanished. I asked Jennifer what they'd said during those phone calls, dreading the answer. She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, then decided I deserved the truth. "Your father-in-law asked about your mental capacity if you woke up. He wanted to know if there would be brain damage, if you'd be able to make legal decisions for yourself. Your mother-in-law asked about your prognosis for full recovery, and whether you'd need long-term care. They weren't calling out of concern for my well-being. They were gathering information, assessing whether I'd be a problem or an opportunity." The realization settled over me like a shroud. This wasn't accidental abandonment born from inability to cope with medical crisis. This was calculated assessment of assets and obstacles. Dr. Angela Foster came in shortly after, a neurologist with sharp eyes and gentle hands. She examined me thoroughly, testing reflexes and cognitive function, asking questions designed to assess memory and reasoning. To her visible relief, I'd avoided significant brain damage. There would be headaches, fatigue, and a long recovery ahead, but my mind remained intact. She also told me something that made my blood run cold. "Your medical records were accessed multiple times during your coma. Not by your treating physicians, but through administrative channels. Someone was looking at your files, specifically your allergy history and the circumstances of your admission. Someone had been checking my records, reviewing the evidence of what had happened to me. The pieces began assembling themselves into a picture I didn't want to see. The shellfish in my food hadn't been an accident. Patricia's satisfied expression when I started reacting wasn't shock. Victoria's hunger for my contract had found a solution. If I was incapacitated, possibly brain damaged, unable to fulfill my obligations to the Cascade Group, then the contract might be transferred. If I was permanently impaired, perhaps a concerned family member could step in to manage my business affairs. They hadn't just abandoned me in that hospital bed, they'd poisoned me and then waited to see if I'd be useful or disposable when I woke up. The betrayal carved through me like a blade, sharp and devastating. These were people I'd trusted, a family I'd joined with hope and optimism despite their obvious reservations about my background. I'd endured 3 years of subtle disdain, because I loved Derek, because I believed marriage meant building something together that transcended class differences and family dynamics. But Derek had left me here to die or survive on my own. His parents had called to assess my value, not my health. And somewhere out there, Victoria was probably already positioning herself to take over Bennett Moments Photography, to claim my contract with the Cascade Group as if she'd earned it through her own talent and determination. I lay in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, and made a decision. They'd tried to erase me, to reduce me to a convenient obstacle that could be removed or controlled. They'd underestimated me spectacularly. I wasn't the naive young woman who'd married into their family 3 years ago. I'd built a successful business in one of the most competitive creative industries. I'd negotiated with corporate executives and delivered under impossible pressure. I knew how to fight for what was mine. But first I needed to understand exactly what they'd done. I needed evidence, documentation, proof of their conspiracy. Because I had a terrible suspicion that the poisoning was just the beginning, that while I lay unconscious they'd been busy destroying everything I'd built. The Whitman family had made a catastrophic mistake. They'd left me alive, and now I was awake, and I remembered everything. The hospital became my prison and my sanctuary in equal measure. 4 more days passed before Dr. Foster cleared me for discharge, 4 days during which no member of the Whitman family crossed the threshold of my room. The silence from Derek was absolute, as if our 3-year marriage had simply evaporated the moment I became inconvenient. I called his cell phone 17 times. Each call went straight to voicemail, his recorded voice cheerful and professional, asking callers to leave a message he'd return promptly. My messages grew increasingly desperate, then angry, finally settling into cold determination. On the 3rd day of consciousness, I called the house in West Hills. Patricia answered, her voice carrying that particular blend of false warmth and genuine condescension she'd perfected over decades of social climbing. "Oh, Rachel," she said as if surprised to hear from me despite knowing exactly where I'd been and why. "We heard you were awake. How are you feeling, dear?" The endearment felt like acid on an open wound. I asked why no one had visited, why Derek wasn't answering his phone, why I'd been left alone to wake up confused and frightened in a hospital bed. Patricia's response was delivered with the casual cruelty of someone swatting an irritating insect. "Well, you know how it is. Derek has been absolutely swamped at work. The markets have been turbulent, and his clients need constant attention. And frankly, Rachel, after what happened, we all needed time to process. You created quite a scene at dinner. It was deeply embarrassing." I created a scene. The words hung in the air, their absurdity so profound I almost laughed. I'd nearly died from anaphylactic shock, spent 2.5 weeks in a coma, and Patricia was concerned about embarrassment. I tried to point out that someone had put shellfish in my food, despite knowing my severe allergy, that this wasn't a social faux pas, but a medical emergency that nearly killed me. Patricia's tone shifted, becoming sharp and dismissive. "Now, Rachel, let's not be dramatic. You must have accidentally eaten something from the communal dishes. We certainly didn't serve you anything with shellfish. Perhaps you should be more careful about what you put in your mouth, rather than making wild accusations. Honestly, the way you're behaving, maybe the doctors should evaluate your mental state along with your physical recovery." The threat was unmistakable. She was already laying groundwork to question my sanity, to paint me as unstable and unreliable. I realized with crystalline clarity that continuing the conversation would only give her more ammunition. I ended the call without another word, my hands shaking not from weakness but from rage so intense, it felt like electricity coursing through my veins. That afternoon brought my first visitor, but not the one I'd been hoping for. Olivia Martinez burst through my hospital room door like a whirlwind, her dark eyes blazing with fury and concern in equal measure. She'd been my best friend since college, the person who'd photographed my early portfolio shoots when I couldn't afford an assistant, who'd designed my business logo and website for free, who'd celebrated every milestone of Bennett Moments Photography as if they were her own achievements. She hugged me carefully, mindful of the IV lines still snaking into my arm, and I felt tears I'd been suppressing for days finally break free. Olivia held me while I cried, her own face wet with tears of relief and anger. When I could finally speak,
No!
I asked her what she knew,
No!
what she'd heard during the weeks I'd been unconscious. Her expression darkened. She pulled a chair close to my bed and took my hand. Rachel, something is seriously wrong. I've been trying to visit you since the day after your hospitalization. The Whitmans told the hospital you were only allowed family visitors, that you needed complete rest without external stress. They had you listed under some kind of restricted access protocol. I finally got through by claiming to be your sister and showing up during a shift change when the regular nurses weren't at the desk. The revelation hit like a physical blow. They'd isolated me deliberately, cutting me off from friends who might advocate for me or question the narrative they were constructing. Olivia continued, her voice tight with controlled anger. It gets worse. 2 weeks ago, Victoria showed up at your studio. She had keys, Rachel. Your keys. She told Melissa and the other staff that you'd asked her to manage things during your recovery, that you'd be stepping back from day-to-day operations indefinitely due to health concerns. Melissa was my studio manager, a talented young photographer I'd hired and mentored over the past 2 years. She was loyal and competent, but also young and intimidated by authority figures. Victoria Whitman, with her designer clothes and air of entitled confidence, would have been difficult for Melissa to challenge, especially if she had keys and seemed to have legitimate authorization. What did Melissa do? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. Olivia's jaw tightened. She believed Victoria. They all did. Victoria has been running Bennett Moments for the past 2 weeks. She's taking meetings with your clients,
No!
reviewing upcoming shoots, making decisions about pricing and contracts. She's positioning herself as the studio's interim director, and from what I've heard, she's telling people the arrangement might become permanent depending on your recovery. The room seemed to tilt again, though this time it had nothing to do with medication or lingering effects of the coma. My business, the enterprise I'd built from absolute nothing through 8 years of relentless work, was being stolen in real time while I lay unconscious and isolated. Victoria had keys. How did she get keys to my studio? The building used a sophisticated electronic lock system, cards programmed specifically for each authorized person. Olivia pulled out her phone, scrolling through messages until she found what she was looking for. I did some digging. Derek used his power of attorney as your spouse to get duplicates made.
Oh!
He claimed you'd asked him to ensure someone could access the studio in case of emergency, that Victoria was helping out of family obligation. The building management had no reason to question it. Power of attorney. The legal term sent ice through my veins. As my husband Derek had certain automatic rights, but this sounded like something more extensive, more deliberately constructed. I asked Olivia if she knew anything else about legal documents or authorizations. She hesitated, clearly debating how much to tell me while I was still recovering, then decided I needed the truth. There's more, and you're not going to like it. 3 days after your hospitalization, the Cascade Group received a letter on Bennett Moments Photography letterhead. It was supposedly from you, explaining that due to unexpected health issues, you were bringing Victoria Whitman on as co-director of the studio. The letter requested that all future communications regarding the $750,000 contract be directed to both of you, with Victoria serving as primary contact during your recovery period. My vision narrowed to a pinpoint, the hospital room fading around me. That letter was forgery, an outright fabrication using my business identity to legitimize Victoria's theft. The Cascade Group executives had no reason to question it, probably saw it as responsible planning from a professional who'd suffered a medical crisis. They were likely relieved to have continuity of service, rather than worried about the contract's future. Did they respond? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Olivia nodded grimly. They sent a sympathetic reply wishing you well and confirming they'd work with Victoria on upcoming events. There are 2 major weddings scheduled for next month at their flagship property. Victoria is listed as the primary photographer for both. Those weddings represented nearly $60,000 in revenue, but more importantly, they were my opportunity to prove myself to the Cascade Group's executive team. The hotel chain was watching closely during this first year, evaluating whether I could deliver the consistent quality and reliability they demanded. If Victoria handled those shoots and they went well, the executives might decide they preferred working with her. If the shoots went poorly, it would damage my reputation and potentially void the contract for failure to meet standards. Either way, I was being systematically erased from my own success story. Olivia squeezed my hand, her voice fierce. We're going to fight this, Rachel. Every bit of it. I've already started documenting everything, taking screenshots of Victoria's social media posts where she's positioning herself as Bennett Moments creative director. I've been recording conversations with mutual contacts in the industry. We'll get your business back. Her loyalty meant everything in that moment, a lifeline when I felt myself drowning in betrayal. But I needed more than emotional support. I needed legal expertise, someone who understood family law and business contracts, who could navigate the complex intersection of marital rights and intellectual property. I asked Olivia if she knew any lawyers who might help, preferably someone with no connection to the Whitman family or their extensive social network. She smiled, a sharp expression that reminded me why we'd been friends for over a decade. Already on it. I have a contact, a family law attorney named Thomas Reed. He's got a reputation for taking on difficult cases, especially ones involving financial abuse and manipulation within marriages. I called him yesterday after I finally confirmed you were awake. He's willing to meet with you as soon as you're discharged. The pieces were falling into place, a strategy forming from the chaos and pain. I wasn't just going to reclaim my business and my contract. I was going to expose exactly what the Whitman family had done, the calculated cruelty of poisoning someone and then stealing from them while they fought for survival. But I needed to be smart, methodical, patient. They had resources and connections I couldn't match. What I had was truth, and the absolute certainty that comes from having nothing left to lose. Dr. Foster discharged me on day 5 with strict instructions about rest, medication, and follow-up appointments. She also pulled me aside privately, her professional demeanor slipping to reveal genuine concern. Rachel, something about your case has been bothering me. I've reviewed the circumstances of your admission dozens of times. The severity of your allergic reaction suggests exposure to a significant amount of shellfish, not trace contamination or cross-contact. And the delay in receiving epinephrine at home, before the ambulance arrived, that extended delay caused much of the serious damage. I asked her what she meant. She pulled up my chart on her tablet, showing me the timeline. You were exposed to the allergen at approximately 7:15 in the evening based on the 911 call timestamp. But the paramedics' report indicates that no one at the scene had administered your epinephrine, despite it being clearly visible in your purse. Your husband told them he didn't know how to use it, that he panicked. The delay was almost 8 minutes before professional intervention began. 8 minutes. An eternity when someone is suffocating, their airways swelling shut. I always carried 2 epinephrines, a precaution drilled into me since childhood. One lived in my purse, the other in our bedroom at the Whitman house. Derek had seen me use an epinephrine before, years ago during a minor exposure at a restaurant. He knew exactly how they worked. The claim that he panicked and forgot was implausible at best, deliberately false at worst. Dr. Foster's eyes held mine. I can't prove anything, and I'm not making accusations, but as your physician, I have concerns about the circumstances surrounding your medical emergency. If you decide to pursue any kind of investigation, my medical documentation will reflect exactly what I observed and what doesn't add up in the official narrative. Her words were carefully chosen, offering support without stepping over professional boundaries. I thanked her, recognizing that she'd just given me another piece of evidence, another thread to pull in unraveling the Whitman family's conspiracy. They hadn't just poisoned me, they delayed treatment, maximizing the damage, perhaps hoping I wouldn't survive at all. Olivia drove me from Providence Medical Center, not to the West Hills house, but to her apartment in the Alberta Arts District. She'd prepared the guest room, stocked the kitchen with foods she knew I liked, and made it clear I could stay as long as needed. The gesture overwhelmed me. In my weakest moment, my chosen family showed up while my legal family had abandoned me completely. That evening, still exhausted but unable to rest, I finally checked my phone properly. The device had been charging on my hospital nightstand for days, but I'd been too focused on immediate survival to examine it closely. What I found made my blood run cold. My email had been accessed repeatedly during my coma, including the business account for Bennett Moments Photography. Someone had logged in from an IP address I didn't recognize, reading messages from clients, reviewing contracts, accessing financial information. My banking app showed similar intrusions. Someone had attempted to access my business account multiple times, finally succeeding 4 days after my hospitalization. They'd reviewed balances, examined recent transactions, and downloaded statements. My personal checking account showed a transfer I hadn't authorized, moving $5,000 to an account belonging to Derek. The memo line read loan repayment, but I'd never borrowed money from him, had in fact paid back his initial studio investment years ago. My cloud storage, where I kept backup files of contracts, client information, and financial records, had been accessed extensively. Someone had downloaded copies of everything related to the Cascade Group contract, along with my complete client database and pricing structures. They'd copied my intellectual property, my business strategies, everything that made Bennett Moments Photography successful. The violation felt worse than physical assault. They'd invaded every aspect of my professional and personal life, stealing information while I was unconscious and vulnerable. I felt exposed, stripped bare, every private detail of my life now in the hands of people who'd proven they wished me harm. Olivia found me at her kitchen table, laptop open, tears of rage streaming down my face. She sat beside me silently, waiting until I was ready to explain. When I showed her the evidence of electronic intrusions, her expression hardened into something dangerous. "We need to document all of this before they realize you know. Screenshots, detailed records, everything. And we need to change every password you have, lock them out of your digital life immediately." We spent the next 3 hours systematically securing my online presence, new passwords for every account, two-factor authentication enabled everywhere possible, security questions changed to things the Whitmans couldn't guess. With each account we secured, I felt a small measure of control returning. They'd had free access to my life for weeks, but that access ended now. The meeting with Thomas Reed was scheduled for the following afternoon. Olivia drove me to his office in the Pearl District, a converted warehouse building with exposed brick and industrial lighting. Reed was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with sharp gray eyes and an understated confidence that immediately put me at ease. His office walls were covered with framed articles about cases he'd won, many involving complex family law disputes and financial manipulation. He listened without interruption as I laid out everything that had happened, from the poisoning at dinner, through the hospital abandonment to the systematic theft of my business. Olivia provided additional details and showed him the documentation we'd compiled. Reed took extensive notes, his expression growing darker as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and studied me carefully. "Mrs. Whitman, what you've described constitutes multiple serious crimes. Identity theft, fraud, forgery, possibly attempted murder depending on what we can prove about the poisoning. You have grounds for both criminal complaints and civil lawsuits. But I need you to understand something crucial. The Whitman family has significant resources and connections. George Whitman has been influential in Portland's business community for decades. They will fight viciously to protect themselves and their reputation." I met his gaze without flinching. "I don't care about their resources or connections. They tried to kill me and steal everything I've built. I want them held accountable, all of them. Whatever it takes." Reed smiled slightly, a predatory expression that suggested he relished difficult battles. "Good. Because we're going to need that determination. First, we gather more evidence. We need to prove systematic intent, show this wasn't opportunistic theft, but premeditated conspiracy. We need to establish timeline, document every fraudulent action, and build a case so airtight they can't wiggle free through expensive lawyers and social connections." He outlined a strategy that would require patience and precision. We'd start by securing my business immediately, legally revoking any access Victoria had claimed. We'd demand accounting of all business activities during my hospitalization, forcing her to document what she'd done. We'd file for separation from Derek, protecting my assets from further marital claims. And we'd hire a private investigator to dig into the Whitman family's activities during the weeks I was unconscious. The investigator Reed recommended was Rebecca Chan, a former police detective who'd left the force to start her own agency specializing in corporate fraud and domestic investigations. She came to Olivia's apartment that evening, a compact woman in her late 30s with intelligent eyes and an economy of movement that spoke of discipline and focus. Rebecca listened to my story with the same careful attention Reed had shown, but her questions were more pointed, more skeptical. She was probing for inconsistencies, testing whether my account would hold up under hostile examination. When she was satisfied, she explained her approach. "I'll start with the electronic intrusions, trace those IP addresses and determine who accessed your accounts. I'll pull phone records for the Whitman family, look for patterns of communication that suggest coordination, and I'll dig into Victoria's background, see if she has history of similar behavior or financial problems that might motivate this level of theft." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "I also need to investigate the poisoning. That's the most serious allegation, and the hardest to prove. If we can demonstrate that Patricia Whitman deliberately included shellfish in your food, knowing your allergy, and that Derek deliberately delayed emergency treatment, we're talking about attempted murder charges. But that requires evidence beyond your testimony, physical proof or witnesses or documented prior intent." The magnitude of what I was attempting finally crystallized. This wasn't just reclaiming my business or divorcing my husband. This was accusing a prominent Portland family of conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and theft. If I was wrong about any element, if the evidence didn't support the accusations, I'd be destroyed financially and professionally. But if I was right, if I could prove what they'd done, the Whitmans would face criminal prosecution and total social disgrace. I thought about that moment at dinner, Victoria's satisfied expression as my throat closed. I remembered waking alone in the hospital, abandoned and isolated. I recalled the systematic theft of my business. While I fought for survival, my decision was already made. Whatever the cost, whatever the risk, I would see this through to the end. Rebecca left with instructions to avoid any contact with the Whitman family, to document every interaction I did have, and to trust no one in their social circle. She'd start her investigation immediately, beginning with the digital forensics that might prove who'd accessed my accounts. The evidence gathering had begun. That night, unable to sleep despite my exhausted body, I sat at Olivia's kitchen table and did something I'd been avoiding. I opened my laptop and navigated to Bennett Moments Photography's Instagram account. What I saw made my stomach turn. Victoria had posted multiple times during my hospitalization, carefully curated images that positioned her as the studio's creative force. In one post, she stood in my studio wearing one of my trademark black blazers, camera in hand, caption reading excited to expand Bennett Moments' vision during this transitional period. Transitional period, as if my near-death experience was just a career opportunity for her. The comments were filled with well wishes for my recovery, mixed with praise for Victoria's professionalism. She'd crafted a narrative where she was the responsible family member stepping up during crisis, selflessly ensuring business continuity, while I recovered. It was a masterclass in manipulation, using social media to legitimize theft through public perception. I scrolled further, finding posts from the Cascade Group's official account. They'd tagged Bennett Moments Photography in coverage of a recent corporate event, but the photos credited Victoria Whitman as the photographer. My brand, my contract, my reputation, all being transferred to her one post at a time. The digital trail was building her claim to my business, creating a public record that suggested she'd always been integral to the studio's success. Olivia found me staring at the screen, my hands clenched into fists. Without a word, she took the laptop and closed it. You can't torture yourself with this tonight. We have evidence, we have a plan, and tomorrow we start fighting back. Tonight, you need rest. Your body is still healing, and you'll need strength for what comes next. She was right, though sleep seemed impossible with rage and betrayal churning through my mind. But eventually, exhaustion won out. I collapsed into bed in Olivia's guest room, my last conscious thought a grim promise to myself. The Whitman family had made a catastrophic error. They'd left me alive, and now I was going to make them pay for every moment of suffering they'd inflicted. Morning arrived with weak sunlight, filtering through Olivia's curtains, and I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt since before the poisoning. The fog of medication and trauma was finally lifting, replaced by cold determination. Today marked the beginning of my counterattack, the first deliberate step in reclaiming everything the Whitman family had stolen. I dressed carefully in clothes Olivia had retrieved from my studio office, professional attire that projected competence and authority. If I was going to walk back into my own business and confront Victoria, I needed to look like someone who belonged there, someone who couldn't be dismissed or intimidated. The drive to the Pearl District felt surreal, passing familiar streets and landmarks that seemed unchanged despite my world being completely transformed. Bennett Moments Photography occupied the ground floor of a converted industrial building, floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the elegant reception area I'd designed myself. The space reflected my aesthetic, clean lines and natural light, with my best work displayed on the walls in museum-quality frames. Olivia parked across the street, positioning us where we could observe the entrance. Through the windows, I could see Victoria sitting at my desk, talking on the phone with the casual confidence of someone who belonged there. She'd rearranged things, I noticed with a spike of fury. My carefully curated bookshelf of photography monographs had been reorganized. The potted plant I'd nurtured for years was gone, replaced with some stark modern arrangement that suited Victoria's taste, but looked completely out of place. I pulled out my phone and called Thomas Reed. He answered immediately, his voice professional and focused. Remember, stay calm no matter what she says. You're not there to argue or confront emotionally. You're there to deliver legal notice and document her response. Rebecca has a listening device in your bag that will record everything. We need Victoria to incriminate herself, admit what she's done, ideally reveal details about the family's plan. The listening device was a small pin attached to my blazer, sophisticated enough to capture clear audio while being virtually undetectable. Rebecca had fitted it during a morning meeting at Olivia's apartment, explaining that Oregon was a one-party consent state for recordings. As long as I was present in the conversation, anything captured was legally admissible. Olivia squeezed my hand, her dark eyes fierce with protective loyalty. You've got this. Remember who you are and what you built. Victoria is a thief and a fraud. Don't let her make you doubt yourself for even a second. I used my keycard, relieved when it still worked, the electronic lock disengaging with its familiar click. The door swung open, and I stepped inside, the scent of the space instantly familiar. Victoria looked up from my desk, her phone conversation cutting off mid-sentence. For just a moment, genuine shock registered on her face, her eyes widening and her perfect posture faltering. She'd clearly believed I'd be hospitalized longer, possibly incapacitated permanently. Rachel, she said, standing and coming around the desk. Oh my God, you're out of the hospital. We weren't expecting you back so soon. You should still be resting, recovering. This must be so overwhelming for you. The condescension in her voice was palpable, treating me like a confused child, rather than the business owner she'd systematically betrayed. I kept my voice level, professional, letting the recording device capture every word. I'm recovering well, thank you, well enough to resume managing my business. I'll need you to gather any personal belongings you brought here and vacate the premises immediately. Victoria's manufactured concern evaporated, replaced by calculating assessment. She leaned against my desk, a casual posture designed to project ownership and belonging. Rachel, I understand you must be disoriented after everything that happened. But you asked me to help, remember? Derek said you wanted family support to keep the studio running while you recovered. I've been working 18-hour days to maintain your reputation and fulfill your contracts. I never asked you to help with anything, I said clearly, making sure the recording captured my denial. I never gave you permission to access this studio, contact my clients, or represent yourself as associated with Bennett Moments Photography. You used forged documents and Derek's fraudulent power of attorney to steal access to my business. That ends now. Victoria's eyes narrowed, the mask slipping further. You're clearly not thinking straight, Rachel. The head trauma from your accident must be affecting your judgment. Maybe we should call Derek, have him explain the arrangements you both agreed to before your hospitalization. Before I could respond, Melissa appeared from the back office, her young face drawn with confusion. She looked between Victoria and me, clearly uncertain who to trust. Rachel, I'm so glad you're okay. Victoria said you'd been in a serious accident and needed time to recover. She said you'd asked her to manage things temporarily. I turned to Melissa, keeping my voice gentle but firm. Melissa, Victoria lied to you. I never asked her to manage anything. While I was in a coma, she used forged documents to gain access to the studio and my business accounts. She's been impersonating me to clients and stealing credit for work she didn't do. I need you to trust me now. This is still my business, and Victoria has no authority here. Melissa's eyes widened as understanding dawned. She stepped away from Victoria and closer to me. I believe you, Rachel. Some things Victoria said never quite added up. I should have questioned it more. I'm sorry. Victoria saw her control slipping and changed tactics. Fine. You want to play it this way, we'll play it this way. But you should know that the Cascade Group executives have been working with me exclusively for the past 3 weeks. I've built relationships with them, proven I can deliver what they need. If you try to push me out, you'll jeopardize that entire contract. I pulled out my phone and opened my email. I'm sending this right now, I said, hitting send as Victoria watched. It's a formal notice to the Cascade Group explaining that Victoria Whitman has no authority to represent Bennett Moments Photography, that any communications from her were fraudulent, and that all future contact should come directly through me and my attorney. Victoria's composure finally cracked, anger flashing across her face. You're making a huge mistake. The Whitmans have been part of Portland society for generations. We have connections you can't even imagine. You think you can embarrass this family and just walk away. You're delusional. Get out of my studio, Victoria, now. Or I call the police and have you removed for trespassing. She grabbed her designer handbag from my desk with deliberate slowness. This isn't over, Rachel, not even close. My family doesn't lose to people like you. You're going to regret this. She walked out, her heels clicking against the polished concrete floor. The moment she was gone, I felt my legs weaken, adrenaline draining away. The recording device had captured everything, Victoria's threats and implicit admissions about the fraudulent access. I spent the next hour documenting what Victoria had changed or accessed. She'd gone through my filing cabinets, photographed sensitive client contracts, and copied my pricing structures. The violation felt intimate and thorough. Olivia helped me change all the locks, including the electronic access system, ensuring Victoria couldn't return. Thomas Reed had prepared separation papers, formal notice that I was ending our marriage and seeking full dissolution of all shared assets. But before filing those documents, I wanted one more piece of evidence. I wanted Derek to incriminate himself on record, admit to his role in the conspiracy. I texted Derek a message carefully crafted with Reed's input. We need to talk about the separation and dividing our assets. I'm willing to meet at Blue Star Cafe tomorrow at 2 p.m. If you don't show up, I'll file papers without your input, and you'll get whatever the court decides is fair. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed with his reply. Fine, 2 p.m. tomorrow, come alone. The cafe would be public and well populated, making any kind of physical threat unlikely. Most importantly, I'd be wearing the recording device again, capturing whatever Derek said. Derek arrived exactly at 2 p.m., his punctuality a habit ingrained from years of banking schedules. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, and tension in his shoulders. He spotted me immediately and made his way to my table, sliding into the chair across from me without greeting. You look better than I expected, he said, his voice carefully neutral. The doctors weren't sure you'd recover fully. There might have been brain damage. No brain damage, I said, keeping my voice level. Just profound clarity about exactly what happened and who was responsible. We need to talk about the separation, Derek. I'm filing papers next week. I want to make sure you understand what I know before those papers become public record. He leaned back, arms crossed defensively. What do you think you know, Rachel? You had an allergic reaction at dinner. It was a tragic accident. My family has been incredibly supportive, trying to help manage your business while you recovered. And now you're attacking us, making wild accusations. Honestly, you sound unstable. I pulled out my phone and opened a folder of screenshots. These are records of electronic access to my email, bank accounts, and cloud storage during my coma. The IP addresses trace back to your parents' house and Victoria's apartment. Someone systematically went through my entire digital life. That's identity theft and fraud, both felonies. Derek's face paled slightly. You're my wife. I had every right to access shared accounts to manage our finances during your medical crisis. Except these weren't shared accounts, these were my business accounts, password protected, and never authorized for your access. And the timing is interesting. The first intrusions happened within hours of my hospitalization, before anyone could have known how long I'd be unconscious. I leaned forward. Let's talk about the shellfish in my food, Derek. Patricia knew about my allergy. Everyone did, but somehow, concentrated shrimp paste ended up in my serving of risotto. Just my serving. How does that happen by accident? Derek's jaw tightened. Mom explained this already, there must have been cross-contamination in the kitchen. She would never deliberately poison you. And the EpiPen, I continued. You told paramedics you didn't know how to use it, that you panicked, but you'd seen me use one before. You knew exactly how they worked. Why did you wait 8 minutes before calling 911, Derek? His face flushed with anger. I was in shock. Watching you collapse was traumatic. I did the best I could under impossible circumstances. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. You delayed treatment long enough to maximize the damage, hoping I wouldn't wake up at all. That was the plan, wasn't it? Derek stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly. You're insane. I'm not listening to this delusional conspiracy theory. I already have a good lawyer. Derek. Thomas Reed, specialist in family law and financial abuse cases. He's very interested in the forged power of attorney documents you used to access my studio, and the fraudulent letter to the Cascade Group, claiming Victoria was co-director of my business. Derek froze. When he turned back, his expression had shifted to something uglier. You have no idea what you're starting. My family has resources and connections you can't fight. We'll bury you in legal fees, destroy your reputation, make sure you never work in this city again. Walk away now, accept a quiet divorce and a small settlement, and maybe we'll let you leave Portland with something. There it was, the explicit threat I'd been waiting for, captured clearly by the recording device. I'm not walking away from anything. This is my city, my business, my life. Your family tried to steal it, and failed. Now you'll all face the consequences. Derek leaned close, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You should have stayed unconscious. Everything would have been so much simpler. Enjoy the war, Rachel. You're going to lose everything. He stormed out, leaving me standing, while other patrons stared. The recording was perfect. Derek's threats and implicit admissions preserved in crystal clarity. We gathered at Olivia's apartment to review the recording with Thomas Reed. This is excellent, Reed said. He's admitted to coordinated family action against you, threatened professional destruction, and strongly implied foreknowledge of the plan to exploit your medical crisis. Rebecca spoke up. I've been digging into the Whitman family's financial records, large cash withdrawals from Patricia's personal account the week before the poisoning, payments to a private investigator, and extensive phone calls between all three family members in the days leading up to that dinner. The evidence was circumstantial, but suggestive of coordination and planning. We have enough to pursue civil action, and likely get criminal charges for the fraud and identity theft, Reed concluded. Our immediate priority is protecting your business and assets through the separation proceedings, then filing civil suits for damages. The path forward was clear, a multi-pronged legal assault that would hit the Whitman family from multiple directions. But justice required patience and strategic precision. We'd build our case methodically, gathering every scrap of evidence, preparing for the legal battles ahead. The Whitman family would learn that their wealth and connections couldn't protect them from consequences when someone had the courage to fight back. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.